I'm Philip Stoten. I'm here on the SCOOPstudio at Productronica 2017, and I'm joined by three gentlemen to discuss the topic of counterfeiting and combating counterfeiters. We have Bill from Creative Electron, Michael from Aegis, and Keith from YXLON. Keith, let's start with you. Just kind of set the scene a bit. Tell me how big this issue is and how often it comes up with your customers.
It's huge and it's changed. When we first saw it probably 7-8 years ago, it was a few very specialist, high-value components that had hugely long lead times. You could only buy them on the grey market, and people were basically just making other components look like them on the outside. And you took a $20 component that had the same footprint as a $500 component that you couldn't buy that was $1,000 on the grey market, and people were buying things, sticking them on their boards. They weren't working. They were bringing them to X-ray companies, and we were looking inside, and the internals were completely different than the component they expected them to be.
Okay.
And it's gone from there to counterfeiting $10 products.
Wow. Okay. And does that concur with what you're seeing, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not so much now, has anybody come across a counterfeit? It's really how many counterfeits are you coming across? With the IPC and the traceability standard group, we have military guys in the US, and they're giving us stories that are just unbelievable. Like you have a reel of 1,000 parts, you have 200 parts at the beginning that are genuine, and then every seventh one is a counterfeit. So they've specifically gone out to defeat incoming inspection. I mean, who does incoming inspection anymore? Because we have a trusted relationship with suppliers. But this whole paradigm now is being challenged. Because if we start to see these counterfeits coming through and damage being caused, which can be just unbelievable consequence, how are we supposed to manufacture anymore at a low cost if we have to spend all this time checking and confirming our components? It's really going to put us back to the 1980s if we don't do something about it.
Some of us still remember the 1980s. Bill, from your point of view, the problem isn't just a financial one, is it? The problem is the danger, the issues these components can cause in the marketplace, as well as just the cost of buying the wrong component.
Exactly. Yeah, especially with we do a lot of aerospace and military customers in US, and in a lot of those applications, just a matter of spending more money for a component. It might mean having an aircraft frame that works or doesn't work, right? So that's one of the drivers for some of the SAE standards as well that we've worked with, the G19 group that we're part of, where some of these applications do require 100% inspection. So 100% of the components that go into these critical military and aerospace platforms need to be checked for authenticity. Of course, there is X-rays, one of the modalities that we use to check for conformity of the supply chain, but there's also a wide range of modalities like XRF, optical inspection, even ultrasound in some cases, that are required in some cases to determine the authenticity of the components.
Okay, so big problem. Let's talk a little bit about how we can combat that, how we can solve that. Is that done at goods inward? Is it done before goods inward? Is it done on the line? Where can we fix that problem, and how do we go about it?
Yeah, it'd be lovely to say there's an easy solution. Goods inwards, 100% inspection of components works for some things. The big elephant in the room that a lot of people are still not addressing is that a lot of components you can buy what they call a military spec component. These things are standard components, but they're tested to death and they pass all of the tests. So maybe 5% of the components that they start with actually finish the tests. And they go out with a certificate of conformity to a completely different level, and they cost a lot more. And now we're finding people are actually forging the paperwork and selling a standard component as a military grade one. And what we have, we've been working with 2 customers now, and they have gone back to buying ordinary spec components and doing all of the testing themselves, which is vibration testing, temperature testing, a whole range of tests. and they're doing it themselves because they say it's the only way they can be sure that those components will meet the standards. But everybody can't do that.
No.
You know?
I was going to say that's a ridiculously cumbersome solution. So how can we, in a normal environment, make that solution simpler? We've got to do these solutions at the takt time of the line. We've got to do it at a rate and at a cost that's acceptable for the manufacturers. How do you combat that, Michael?
Yeah, you just can't do it. I mean, if there's going to be counterfeit materials coming in, all of the testing and inspection, it's not going to work. We just don't have enough time or money to do it. The only effective way is to stop the problem at source. Now, the problem is that how do you get to the source? With traceability that we've been defining for factories, we are able to pinpoint in a finished product where each individual component came from. Now that's fine going back within the factory. And what we need to do next is to complete that tracking all the way back to the original supplier, so that we establish a secure method for marking and sending components from the manufacturer through distribution to the plant. Now, is it going to happen that we have a case in the market where we come back to a component and trace it and have to go and sue everybody all the time? I don't think it will, because once counterfeiters know that they are going to get found out, once there's policing going on, there's no more incentive to do it because the risk will be too high. So we have to break their business model. We have to make it such that it's not profitable for them to be in business because they know that the risk of being found out is going to be too high. Until we establish that, we have to go on inspecting and checking and all of this other stuff, which is not sustainable.
Okay, so inspection, testing, we currently definitely have to do that. Traceability to provide a deterrent is a possibility. But in terms of the normal strategy of a business, when goods come in, they get goods to the line and goods leave, where do they have to do the inspection and what do they need to do and what can they do quickly to minimize the amount of problems they've got? Obviously, tracing it back, we can do that and sue them later.
Correct. That's a very good question. And so when we take consideration the financial consequences, right, of all the testing that has to be applied, first thing we got to understand is that it depends on what kind of product you're producing, right? If you're making toasters, you don't really have to worry about counterfeit components as much as if you are putting together an F-35, right? So unless the toaster is going to go on a 747, then you might be concerned about. But so if you starting from that, depending on the product you're producing, you're going to apply different levels of testing, right? The first thing that manufacturers and the EMS companies do is a visual inspection. So an incoming inspection, looking for a barcode. Believe it or not, but a lot of the counterfeiting happens at the barcode level, where the part number, for example, is misprinted. So there's that very easy check on the barcode and the labels from the supplier. Then the second level, you're going to do visual inspection of the package, make sure it's compliant with what you expect it to be. Then the next layer of defense that you have is X-ray inspection, to look for uniformity of your lot, right? Make sure that all components look identical inside. And then from there are several different options you can take, from X-ray fluorescence to decapsulation, where you're going to open the component and make sure that the die matches what you're supposed to be. Wire bonding diagrams, schematics of the power. So there's standards like the 6171 that list all these different testing modalities and which type of category your end product is, where that component is going to, and based on that you can determine how much of testing is required or recommended for your product.
Okay, so Keith, I'm going to ask the same question, but as a wrap up, it's obviously a problem that's got out of hand. I don't know whether it's epidemic proportions yet, but it's obviously sizable. We've got inspection as one part of the solution. We've got traceability and deterrent as another part of the solution. Is there enough being done, both legally and technically, to minimize or stamp this problem out?
I think technically we're doing everything we can. We have a good level, as you've said, of, if you like, defense steps. But legally, I don't really know the answer. But I've not heard of anybody who's been successfully convicted of counterfeiting components anywhere.
No, I've not heard of that. Is that something you'd agree with?
They have?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in the US, several people have gone to jail for counterfeiting. Absolutely. Yeah, just last week, a company in Florida, 3 of the owners went to jail for counterfeiting components and selling to the Navy.
Okay, well that's good to hear.
This is a great story because as soon as people know that they're going to get found out, the policing kicks in and the problem corrects itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's that straightforward thing. If you're talking about traceability, that's going to deliver that connection down the supply chain, so you can find the people. And if there are examples in the US, particularly at mil-aero level or naval level, where those people are where litigation is being successful, then that's great news. We should be publicizing that much more.
Yeah, but I hope that it never comes to this legal battle because nobody wins from these things. The important thing is people believe they cannot get away with it anymore. We need the procedures to be in place, the technology to be in place for these trusted exchanges of information and the supply of parts. Then we have a solution where, okay, everything's going to go back to the good level that it has been.
Yeah. And then, if you know it's a bad component and you send it back, there's no benefit to the counterfeiter. And that's the end game. Gentlemen, thanks very much for stopping by. Thanks for your time, and thank you for taking part in this debate. Thank you.